Thanks everyone for registering today. We had a really good number of interested registrations. About 20 odd people were expecting on this webinar, which is really good. These are informal webinars. They're quite chatty, quite interactive. They are recorded, just so you know, and they form part of our monthly series of webinars for GUAC members. They happen every Friday, the last Friday in every calendar month. They're always 11 till 12. And they're on a whole range of topics. And this one came about really after a discussion with Sovereign about some of the work they were doing with employment teams and ways of approaching and motivating individuals that they're working with. So as an aside, I wanted to encourage GUAC members who are on the line to contact us if you've got particular topics or speakers that you'd like to hear from, that you come across in your work. Or if you've got a particular innovative project or something that you think is working really well that you could share with other members, please drop me a line. I'll put my email contact on the chat box, and it's on our website as well. But I wanted to just do a quick plea for that. And this is obviously our first one of 2018, so we're really excited to have some strong speakers and some varied speakers today. Quick GUAC notices, a bit like the parish notice board for GUAC. I can't resist once a month just reaching out to members and a few quick reminders. We have 1 week to go for GUAC members to respond to the Salford University Research Project survey. So that's a stage of some research which we've commissioned with Salford. It's going into its reporting year this year, and we're encouraging our members to complete that survey. It's obviously online, takes between 10 minutes and half an hour, and will give us the information, or give Salford the information that we need to prove elements of the impact and the value of the work we do. So it's super, super critical that we get as many responses from GUAC members as we can. So that was my plea, my monthly plea. A bit of quick information. We have next Friday, the 2nd of February, our first member day of the year. So that's a face-to-face day, 10 till 4. It's in Manchester this time. They've typically been in London, but we are rightly starting to alternate them north and south. And if you're a GUAC member out there and you've got time and interest to come up, drop me an email in the next couple of days, and we've got just a few spaces left. It's obviously free to GUAC members, and we've got some really interesting speakers coming up. We've got our own chair, our new chair coming along. We've got the IPPR coming to talk about the landscape of employment and skills policy and housing, what all that's looking like, what we're going to wrestle with this year. We have Work and Health Programme at the Growth Company, a Manchester-based prime contractor, who are doing a lot of integrated work around health, employment and skills, so that's very relevant today. We've got the Big Lottery Fund coming in, a policy manager, and we've got Salford coming in to do a final plea. So we've got some really good speakers. It's a nice day. Again, it's informal, so I just wanted to do a final plug for that. And just so you know, at the same time as this webinar today, we've got a Midlands-based, East and West Midlands GUAC meeting taking place, hosted by Orbit, another member. And I just wanted to mention that because if you're in a region that doesn't seem to meet and wants to do some regionally based networking face-to-face, let me know. We're interested in supporting those. And final thing I'm going to say is news to follow. It'll launch in our newsletter next week very softly, but I will be working with Heidi from Sovereign over the next month or two, and Alan, on beginning and launching the GUAC Network, which will be an online resource which will allow us as GUAC members to search, find each other, pose questions, look for themes, and all the rest of it. And just be better connected to each other. So that is more than enough waffle from me. We will be, in this webinar, be running some polls, but the first speaker I'd like to hand over to is Emily Morris. She's an occupational psychologist, hello, a trainer, coach, hugely experienced in this area, has for her sins got 13 years experience with JCP in her past, which I'm sure will inform her life and her skills and the way she's worked with people. So I'll now hand over to Emily, who's going to talk us through an introduction to this topic today, and then we'll go on to Jez and Heidi. So I'll go on to mute and video off, and Emily, really looking forward to hearing what you've got to say now. Thanks.
Thank you. Welcome. I'll just put my slides up. Okay. Everybody see that? Okay, great. So welcome to I think I've got 10 minutes just to talk about solution-focused approach, to give you a brief introduction. Before I do that, I'd just like you to have a look at some questions I'm going to put up on the screen. I'm going to read them aloud to you, and as I do that, I'd just like you to think about what effect they have on you. How do they make you feel? So, first one is, why can't you work? What is the main barrier that stops you from working? What other barriers are preventing you from working? What problems are you facing? What is the main problem? When do you feel this problem is at its worst? How often does the problem affect you? And what other issues are you suspecting? Think about the effect this has in comparison to these questions. Tell me about a time when you worked in the past. What skills did you use? Tell me about times when you feel you're more able to look for work. What are you able to do during those times? Hopefully you can feel that the first set of questions really invite you to think about a time when you weren't achieving, when times when actually the obstacles you were facing seemed very, very difficult to resolve. In comparison, the second set of questions are much, much more positive. And the second set of questions are much more in the flavour and tone of solution-focused approach. I'm sure I've asked many of those questions, the first set of questions, to people. The second set of questions are much more in line with the solution-focused approach. As Lindsay said, I used to work for Job Centre Plus, and I worked with individuals with disabilities and long-term health conditions. Job Centre Plus was looking for a new approach for its psychologists to adopt with clients, and we adopted the solution-focused approach. So we were trained up, and then the idea was we then trained up other advisors to use the skills, really because it's seen as a very valuable tool for encouraging progress and encouraging change in individuals, and promoting self-efficacy, of which I'll talk about in more detail in a minute. So, the solution-focused approach, I have no idea how much you know about the approach. Maybe some of you have already heard of it, maybe some of you are experts in it, and maybe some of you know nothing at all. So apologies if I am repeating things that you already know. It's come from the States. It's based on solution-focused brief therapy, a bit of a mouthful. It's come from the 1980s by Steve DeShazer and Insoo Kim Berg. I've probably mispronounced their names. But they were working at the Brief Family Therapy Center in Milwaukee. And they were looking to move away from a much more problem-focused approach to a solution-focused approach with the people that they were working with. And so they developed the solution-focused approach. The concept of it is that it's a very powerful approach to achieve change and helps promote self-efficacy, as I've said. So what is self-efficacy? This was a theory put forward by Albert Bandura. Albert Bandura is a social psychologist, for those of you who don't know. I'll just briefly read his definition, which is a bit wordy, and then I'll give you an explanation of it. Albert Bandura talks about self-efficacy as the belief in one's capability to organise and execute courses of action required to manage prospective situations. What does that really mean? It basically means if you have a belief that you have control over what happens to you, then you're more likely to make actions to make whatever goals you want happen. In Job Centre Plus's position, for instance, I would often meet clients who would say that they didn't feel that whatever they did would make any difference to them getting a job. And henceforth, what they did was they then didn't fill in job applications. And the research that Job Centre Plus did showed that self-efficacy was the biggest determinant of whether somebody got employment. And the way that solution-focused approach fits into that is it helps promote self-efficacy. It helps individuals believe I have control over what happens to me, and therefore I'm going to take actions to get what I want. And it meant that what I heard less of were comments like this: no one's going to hire me, whatever I do isn't going to make any difference. And you can kind of almost hear the hopelessness and the helplessness in that sort of statement. So, how does a solution-focused approach help promote self-efficacy? One of the things it does is it sets a very positive tone to the meeting or call, because this can be done over the telephone as well, right from the beginning. So even before I've met somebody, I might be inviting them to notice things that are going well before I meet with them. And I would then ask them about it. So why might this make any difference? If you think about the individuals that we're working with, many of them are facing very difficult, very challenging situations, and they may feel very swamped by that. Often with the people I work with, anxiety and depression, they may talk about feeling as if they're drowning, feeling as if there's no way that anything can get any better. And if I ask them about their anxiety or their pain or their worry, or whatever it is, they may say, it happens to me all the time, every day. And those sorts of fundamental beliefs are not helpful in order to taking action to make a difference. So what I'm inviting people to do is to really notice things that may be a little bit better. And I'm using tentative language on purpose, because I'm not saying that they may feel no pain or no anxiety, but that they actually may feel a little bit less of it. And it's a bit like, I think I've used this analogy before, if I want to update my car to a nice bright red shiny Fiat 500, and I'm thinking about it, when I'm driving on the M4, I will then see lots and lots of bright red shiny Fiat 500s, because I'm pre-programmed to notice them. My subconscious mind is looking for them. And that's what these sorts of questions will do, inviting us to really notice things that are going a little bit better. Solution-focused approach also helps us identify times when we don't feel so overwhelmed by things, when we've dealt with a difficulty in the past, or when we're coping. So from this, what I might ask somebody is, tell me about a time when the anxiety isn't quite so bad for you. What are you able to do? What are you able to do during those times? What is helping you to cope? When does it feel not quite so overwhelming? So you can see it fits quite nicely into the previous question I've asked them. Times when the pain is not quite so bad. Initially, people may not be able to answer that question, but you may answer it and ask it in a different way. It helps people to see that the situation they're facing is not quite so bad all the time. Solution-focused approach also helps encourage people to have a very clear picture in detail of what it looks and what it feels like if they've achieved their goal. So, and why might this be important? It's important because if we can picture what it looks and feels like to achieve what we want, we're more likely to take action to do it. And the reason for that is, if I'm asking somebody to say tomorrow you've got your dream job, what difference would that make to your life? What would it feel like? You can almost see people living that feeling. They may sit up very straight and they may smile and they feel what it would be like to get that job. When I'm then asking them to action plan to get that job, it's easier for them because they already feel as if they've got it. So they are action planning with me from a position of strength, from a position of feeling as if they've achieved what they want to achieve. The solution-focused approach also helps people to identify the things that they can draw upon. They may feel initially as if it's just me, I have no help, so how am I going to be able to get what I want? Well, with a solution-focused approach, you're inviting people to really identify personal strengths and resources, and those resources may be internal or external that they can call upon. So, for instance, I might say to somebody, When you last got your job, what helped? What personal skills and qualities did you draw on? What did you think you did very well during that time? And what organisations or resources that you used that were very helpful? I should point out, by the way, I'm using work as an example here. It works exactly the same for any other thing that people want. Maybe thinking about the housing sector, hoarding, whatever it is that you're working with them to achieve, you can use these skills with. The solution-focused approach also invites people to measure the progress they've made. So I might say to somebody, and that's not focusing, by the way, on the progress they haven't made, but the progress that they've already achieved. Because then when I'm talking to them about steps they can take to progress in the future, they do it from a position of feeling like, hey, do you know what? I've already done quite a lot already. So just one more step, is that going to be so challenging? And also encouraging them just to take one extra step initially to action plan for that. So I might say to somebody, what progress do you feel you've made towards the goal that you want? And what do you need to do in order to go one step further? So not reach the end, but just one step further. So those are some of the brief sort of skills and things and strategies that you use in a solution-focused approach. So what do I really feel is the impact? I think people take ownership, they take action, and they make progress. And it makes our job easier. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Emily. That was great. Just to remind attendees, all the slides, Emily, if that's okay, we will share as part of the webinar recording and also for Jez and Heidi coming up. That was a lovely, really clear introduction to some of the differences between perhaps traditional and the approach that you've outlined there. Is it the brief approach? What's it called again? You're on mute.
Apologies. I call it the solution-focused approach. It's easy to say.
Yeah. I think I picked up brief from a website. So solution-focused approach kind of says what it does as well, doesn't it? Okay.
Yeah.
Right. I'm not going to speak anymore, but Alan, I'm going to hand over to you if you're there, because I believe we're going to do a poll question before handing over to Jez and Heidi. Is that okay, Alan?
Yes, I've just hit launch now. So everyone who's attending today, apart from the panelists, I've just put on a short question. Are you already using SF? And the simple answer is yes and no. If everyone's able to just respond to that, that'd be fantastic, please. I've already got one I see. And then we're going to do a follow-up question after Heidi and Jez's presentation. We're going to be doing just a sort of second follow-up question at that point. So we've got 5 respondees so far. If I leave that open for the moment, Lindsay, whilst people respond, and pass back to you.
Yep, that's fine. Thanks. We'll just. I've got a reply on the chat box actually, which is a no to currently using solution focus. So that may be in lieu of the poll. But are you giving us the poll result now, Alan, or later?
So far, it's 2 people yes, 4 people no.
Okay, that's not a huge surprise. I think this is probably more of an introduction, but be interested on the 2 who said yes. If you can put any comments in the chat box, it'd be interesting to know how you're familiar with it, if you're using it currently, or where you've got that from. That'd be really good. Okay, so we'll come back to a second poll at the end. But now, without further ado, I'd like to hand over to our 2 colleagues from Sovereign, stalwart GUEC members, Jez Bentley and Heidi Lation. They've both been at Sovereign for at least a decade and working across housing, community, employment services, and have used the solution focus approach practically and applied it. So I'm really looking forward to hearing from Heidi and Jez, and I'll go back onto mute and stop video, and over to you guys. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Lindsay. I'm just going to bring up our slides. Hopefully everybody can see those.
Yeah.
Okay, so I thought I'd start by just giving you a bit of context and take you back 2 years ago to where we were at Sovereign. What Sovereign did was repurpose itself as a social business, and what it did to enhance the strategy further was to add in independent and resilient residents. Welfare reforms and the rent formula were taking place. So welfare reforms, we already had universal credit, bedroom tax and benefit cap happening. And this led to a dialogue really about actually future-proofing. How do we continue to be effective at rent collection and income recovery? And in a world with rent formulas, how do we do that with maybe the same or even less resource? And supporting frontline teams became ever more a challenging environment for them. So it became a real focus for us. For me, as a service manager of the employment service, what really struck me was if I wanted a service that continued to be progressive and quality, I had to recognise that welfare reforms were increasingly asking residents to be more adult and more self-efficient. And for us as professionals, welfare reforms really require the sector to have a change in mindset of what effectively collecting rent and income recovery looked like. As a team manager, for me, I was very aware that I have a team of what we call white knights with very strong help drivers, and I was aware that I needed to bring them along the way with me in terms of understanding how to use their help driver in a healthy and effective way, rather than ending up having a team that were burning out from the emotional labouring of providing care for vulnerable residents. I was also really curious about what good customer service was going to look like in a world of universal credit and other welfare reforms. And the delays in the Building Better Opportunity programmes for me meant the heightened challenge of providing skills around helping people with health conditions, when certainly for this housing association, where being good at health isn't necessarily our forte. I think for me, while solution focus has really provided an impact on quality of what we do, there aren't specific solution focused measures that were tracked, but I can say that we were achieving 1 in 4 residents securing work. That's now shifted to 1 in 3. We've more expediently identified residents as well who are unable or unwilling to engage with us, and what that's done for the employment service is protect a very scarce resource. It's a small team across a very wide geography and a lot of stock. It also means we're able to alert the income recovery team to legal action when we know that it won't be a case of that person getting work or better work to be able to stick to paying their rent arrears or court orders. As a team, we're now better equipped to hold adult-to-adult dialogue. And what I've noticed in the team because of that is that they are expending less emotional energy and they're doing less actions for residents. It used to be very much that the staff would come away with a longer list than the resident had following their meetings. And for me, what really struck me right at the very early days, in fact in the first week of the team being trained by Emily, was that we had powerful feedback from residents, things like, I've never had such a productive meeting, or that's the most positive meeting I've ever had about my work goals. I'm going to hand you over to Jez now, who's going to talk to you about using solution focus on the ground.
Thanks, Heidi. Just like to say, I'm still a bit of a white knight, but that's something that I have to work with. But what I'd like to do is set the scene a little bit about, we go back to, oh, this is the one, isn't it? Yeah. A little snapshot of a typical sort of case management sort of transaction, if you like. When if I meet a resident, they're low in confidence, there's a low mood, they kind of feel like they have no control over their life, it's very passive, they're being done to a lot, they're in the system where people are telling them, you should be doing this, you should be doing that, and there's a lot of sort of time, a lot of my time and energy working around that. And often people have multiple issues. Their mental health, they're fleeing the domestic violence. There's lots of things going on in their life, and I think with all that in mind, they don't see themselves as being a success. From my side, from a professional side, there's lots of we have to get outcomes. That's our bread and butter. We need to get outcomes. We feel kind of under pressure to achieve that. There's a lot of time and energy spent to work with the residents to build their trust. There's a lot of work to get them from this passive state into a more active space and to actually get on and own their work journey. And there's a lot of different. We have to prioritise different cases. Who are those most in arrears? What's happening in their life? What are the challenges? Who do we need to see first? So that's a typical kind of sort of snapshot of the case management 2 years before. If I can give you a little bit more detail about it's 2 years before I started using Solutions Focus, a little bit more information about specifics around before and after Solutions Focus for me, for my journey. And for sure, you have to take a leap of faith. It's really difficult when you first start to move your mindset from what you know works, what you think you know works, and what you know best for the person. I've spent a long time in welfare to work, and I have a good understanding of what works, and I can see some good results from what I do. So that's my kind of mindset from the start. But with Solutions Focus, it totally changed. It's actually blew. I keep sort of referring to it. I think I annoy my colleagues because I go on about it so much, but it's totally changed my practice. So in the typical transaction before, I got trained in Solutions Focus with the resident. The resident is very dependent. It's easy for them to talk about their issues and the problems. They can become quite entrenched. They're so used to going through a system where agencies and professionals will talk from a child-adult state. So they're talking from an adult to a child, and it's that kind of relationship, and that's the expectation of a resident. That's how, when I arrive at their property to have a conversation, that's what they think is going to happen. So they kind of assume, they assume a sort of a sense, a way of being. You're going to talk to me, you want to help me, and this is my expectation of that. Residents will spend a lot of time as well around their problems. They're self-handicapped themselves. They've already written themselves off. There's no kind of self-belief that they can do really well. They kind of make excuses. No one's going to employ me. I haven't got the qualifications. I'm not going to be good enough, and that's quite evident. On the other side, as me as a professional, when I go into that environment, often 3-4 meetings in a day, it starts to become very draining. When people are focusing on problems and issues, I'm a caring person. I have lots of empathy. It's hard not to get drawn into that, and you become one with their problem. And there's a lot of emotional investment from me as a person, and I can often take that home, which is one of my challenges. And when we're both in that space, it's very difficult for each of us to move out of that space. When you're working with people, particularly vulnerable people, you're frustrated a lot of the time. You might spend a lot of time working with an employer, for example, to set up an interview. You create a space for people where they feel safe. They can go and attend the interview, or you'll go with them to sign up to a program, and they don't turn up, or they don't let you know, and that's frustrating. So you have to go back and smooth everything over with the employer or the program provider. So you're kind of going around in a cycle of frustration. And with that in mind, it lacks efficiency for me. I spend a lot of time chasing people up. Have you done this? Have you done that? And it's not very satisfying for everyone involved. And it's difficult, therefore, to hit your KPIs, to get people into work, or to move people into moving into work activities, or for people to achieve accredited learning outcomes. It's a difficult place to be. But here's the thing: if you take the leap of faith with a solutions focus, it totally changes the transaction. As Emily says, you're starting from a place of success. And I like to, when I go in to speak to a resident, I like, if you see that person as resourceful, hopeful and successful, it totally changes the outcome, the way you interact with people. There's a much more positive space that you occupy, both of you. And by asking people, I think what the key things is, no one's ever listened to people. That's what often you find, well, no one's ever asked me what I'd really like to do. No one's ever talked about my ambitions or aspirations, and no one's ever acknowledged that I actually have strengths. So you giving that space, the permission for people to really, oh, actually, yeah, I am resilient. I am quite motivated. So you're just referring back to a time. If you ask them a time when they've overcome a particularly difficult problem, what were they doing? This awareness of their own ability to overcome challenges is quite amazing, and you compliment people. That isn't it fantastic? You overcome that really difficult thing in your life, whatever that might be. You're really giving them permission to say, yeah, actually, that was I had the ability to overcome that challenge, and it's okay. I think what's good, a good approach with solution focus as well, is that you can normalise actually with people that it's okay to feel angry. And some days you're going to feel stressed. Some days you feel tired, and all of us have rejections if you're from employers, and no feedback, and that's okay. And so it's okay to be annoyed with that, and we all feel like that. And no one's ever said that to them, and I think that changes the interaction as well. And you're bringing that self-belief up again. And what's really good for me is people will take ownership of what they do. So we're working on an action plan. They will do those actions. Whereas before I might say, for example, someone needs to do some IT learning. If I was working with Learn Direct, for example, I'd ring for them and say what courses are, can you tell me what courses are available for this resident? Where what's noticeably different is that person, you give them the number and they will ring, and lo and behold, 3 months later they've finished their IT course and they're on to level 3 business admin. So this is just, there's that sense of purpose and direction and drive and ambition that people it just changes. It changes their outlook. They have a self-belief that they can really achieve it, and it's just amazing really to see the difference. And what I particularly like is, and that family referred to it, we use a thing called an approach called, we ask people to, if they woke up tomorrow and they were in a job they really wanted, what would you be doing differently? How would you feel? The difference in the person, when you ask them to visualize that and you build this rich picture with them, it lifts people. Their smiles, their body language, they're more open. They're actually living the moment, and just you're actually giving them that belief that they can do it, and that as a professional, it's transformational for me. It's quite amazing, and it's really, I feel privileged to be part of that, and to help that journey. But certainly as a professional, you don't do that much, and that brings me on to before and after. For me, is it's more efficient. You don't really need. It's not about me. It's about that person. It's about what they have inside them already, which is, we're just helping them find that and discover it. Job satisfaction for me, it's just a couple of years ago, it's difficult when you work with people with high levels of vulnerability, multiple complex needs. It's hard not to feel burnt out, to be perfectly honest. But I have more energy. There's this kind of a simplicity about the transactions. It's a much more engaging process. It feels like, as Heidi mentioned, that there's the ability to be adult to adult with people is great. And my KPIs, my particular job outcomes have say gone through the roof, but they've increased really when I'm not actually done much and I'm not doing as much, so I'm getting more bang for my buck, and that's really good. The last point on there is about whole household results. What I've really noticed is if you're working with the mother or father, for example, of a family, that person, that the change in them kind of rubs off on the rest of the on their sons and daughters. And whereas at the beginning of our journey together, the resident and myself, they will talk about the difficulties with their son and daughter as well. And it's just happened quite often that they're getting into work. They're kind of the sort of leader of the family unit is so positive that it's rubbing off. And that's, you can't ask for more. It's fantastic to see. So in summary for me, there's what I really like about solutions focus. It's a flexible, it's totally flexible to each individual. You don't have to bring it with you every time. I think what's changed now, you don't have to have a game plan. I think previously, before solutions focus, you would come with, oh, I know what's right. This is they need a CV, they need this job, they need this course. It's really good to just arrive at the meeting and let it flow, just let it arrive at the destination that the resident wants, and that's really liberating for me. Often, some people, I might get frustrated that you don't have to use it every time. Some people already have decided on their direction, so you don't have to use it every time. I think, when I first started using it, you assume you have to use it in every transaction, every meeting. And that's not the case. You can just pick and choose some of the things. Some people are already moving in the right direction. You just gently guide them along. I talked about the growth of residents. It is actually really transformational. The difference in people that a couple of years later will stay in, a year later will stay in touch and tell me about what they're doing. They're actually, the achievements is fantastic. And that's, as a professional, the job satisfaction from that growth and development of individuals who probably have been written off previously is great. It really makes my day. Every day is fantastic, and it makes me smile, and that's a good thing to go home with. It really does. It really does help us achieve the KPIs. It makes a difference. What I particularly like as well, so as well as increased job outcomes, it helps lower arrears, and that the positive experience they've had from the solutions focused approach allows the resident to therefore engage better with the income officer, for example, or the housing officer, and that's really, and then helps bring the arrears down as well. It's much more efficient. For me, I have to do a lot of travelling in this role, so it's really useful for me. I don't have to go back and to that resident, and that cycle of frustration is gone. When I talked about the white note at the beginning, I think it's that ownership and responsibility piece. I wanted to fix every single person and come up with a solution for them. And I think the adult to adult relationship that we have now, and the acceptance that, I can't fix everybody, and there is some ownership on the other side, on the other person, is key for me. That really helps me in my day to day. And it might sound cliched or cheesy, but it has given me a new lease of life to sustain this career. I'm just about to embark on my solutions focused diploma. I like it so much. So, yeah, I think we should. I recommend it to anyone who's working in this field to give it a go. It's really transformative for me, and I'm sure it will be for you too. Thank you.
Brilliant. Any more comments, Heidi or Jess? And Emily, thanks for coming back on.
I just wanted to add that where Jez said about right at the end that it's given him a new lease of life to sustain his career, actually 2 years ago he was thinking that his desire and his ability to stay providing the support within the role that he had come to an end. So that's really kind of, for me, I don't want that point to be underestimated, quite how much of a new lease of life it has given him to sustain doing something he does love, but in a way that's far more healthy, far more balanced.
Yeah, absolutely. And that came across really clearly. And the whole presentation was really honest and a really balanced view of what it's actually like to work every day with people with complex or multiple needs, and how best to deal with that, and the transformative approach of solution focused, the adoption of SF interventions, and the difference that made. So that's come across really clearly, and is really useful.
It's tough, and you can get stuck in I've got to fix this person. Yeah.
Well, I had a general question, and actually we've had a question from a panelist, a delegate, Nikki Watts, who is at Inspired to Achieve, which is part of Yarlington Housing. And so I'll do both mine and Nikki's question because they're related, really. I had a question about what was the process really with Emily and Sovereign for adopting solution-focused approaches. How did that begin, and what process did you need to go to? What training took place? And linked to that, Nikki's comment was that she delivers direct support to residents and tenants, and they're increasingly finding that there's more and more barriers, and they need more and more support. So you can feel that that rising dependency and more demands situation happening. Which is a really useful comment for Nikki to make. And so she's asked Emily if you'd be open to coming and delivering training, and to bring that back, I suppose, is that the way to start, to
yes.
select staff and train, and how does that work? What's the format of that?
Yes.
And Sovereign or Emily to comment on that.
I mean, I think I'm probably going to hand over to Heidi for this bit, but I think preparation before the training begins is important. I think there has to be quite a lot of work on why it's being done, what the purpose is, and how it fits with what the organisation is seeking to achieve. Heidi, would you agree with that?
Yeah, totally agree with that. I think for me, it was also about really being dedicated. So once you've made that decision, as a team, we had 2 full days with Emily. The first day was all about solution focus. Then a month later, we had another day talking about motivational interview techniques. And then after that, what we were doing was every week we were catching up as a team and practicing, because with solution focus, there's lots of different elements to practice and to use. And it's gaining the confidence with those, and then learning your own, in that moment, as Jez was speaking, learning which actual question of solution focus you're going to use at any given time. It was also focus for us as a team then to share with one another, how did that go? It didn't go so well, it felt awkward, it felt clunky, and then normalizing it. That's okay, that's fine, that's what happens. And giving the comfort that actually it's okay, because you can slip in and out of solution focus depending on how that person is reacting to it, and whether actually they do need some direction, and it's okay to be doing that. So I think for us actually as a team, it was really giving support and making sure that there was that, initially there was a lot of focus on it. I think without that, we probably wouldn't have been able to embed it.
Yeah, and that's following really good practice of any training, that there has to be something that continues afterwards. And, you know, Heidi was so on board, and I think that's also crucial, that, you know, the manager, the team leader has to be supporting it as well. It has to be brought up at team meetings. There has to be a focus, but also with an understanding this is difficult, and with any change in any practice, we can feel like the things we used to be good at are suddenly gone because we're trying to embed this new skill. So again, just reassuring people that's normal. That's really normal. I mean, something like the future question can seem very odd initially. So just thinking about wording it in words that you're comfortable with.
Yeah. And that takes practice, I guess.
It takes practice. And then also thinking that I don't have to use this all the time. I can just pick and choose, just slot a bit here, slot a bit there. And I think, as Jez said, this is not going to be necessary for every person you work with.
Right. Okay.
I think. Sorry.
Go on, Jez. Go ahead.
Just to add to what Heidi and Emily said, it's having permission to, to try it and not feel like you have to do it every single time, and find your own language and approach. And I think if you can, once you get your head around that, you feel okay to do it. You don't feel pressured.
Yeah, feels natural then.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely. It becomes much more natural, because initially the team's reaction was, oh my God, I've got to be perfect at this from day one.
Yeah.
And every single meeting that I've got booked in, so I've got 4 residents today that I'm seeing, so I've got to do it with 4 residents, got to be perfect. And that tension of the helper driver sat with, but I've got KPIs to achieve and deliver as well. And I've got a script here of stuff that I know has always worked for me for the last 10 years doing this job. I know what tools to use. It's very difficult to come away from that and take that leap of faith. So it's very much important to have a culture where you're supporting one another through that transition, and it's not about being perfect, it's about a longer term journey to get there.
And it's okay to say, I blew it.
Yeah.
It sounds a bit like therapy with KPIs, actually. A couple of quick comments I should pass on from Helena at Monmouthshire Housing Association, who says we deliver an employment and skills service to tenants, and she thinks they're using that solution-focused approach, but perhaps informally. So perhaps that is about a more therapeutic approach, but informally. So it'd be interesting to see if Monmouthshire have actually got the tools in place, or whether it's more of a dynamic and approach to working with tenants and residents, which is about enabling rather than dependency. And Emily, we should share your contact details if that's okay with everyone. And there's a question from Stephanie Hill, who is at ComMutual, which is part of Liverpool Mutual Homes, asking for any examples where organisations across a city, or a locality, might come together to follow this approach. There's a sort of shared message, perhaps a little bit of peer-to-peer support and technique sharing, and perhaps experience you can share from different residents in different housing associations. So that question really is, Sovereign, are you acting alone in this in your region and area, or is there a wider network of SF practitioners that you can link to, or indeed, Emily, do you know anything about that?
I haven't seen anything official, but I mean, personally, I have worked with Monmouthshire Housing Association and another housing association in the Wales area, because I'm based in Cardiff, but I moved down. What I'd also say is that actually it might be quite useful to learn from other organisations as well. It's currently being used in the insurance field, for instance. Aviva, I've trained up Aviva staff.
Right. Okay.
So I think, yes, absolutely, cross learnings could be put together, across different regions, but also for different industries as well.
Yeah. Okay, that's interesting that insurance are looking at it. I've got a couple more comments, but just looking at the time, I thought before I go to those, I might call back on Alan to see if he's around to run the final poll, which is probably a follow-up question to the first. Alan, hello, you're there.
There we go, I've just launched it.
Okay, so let's invite people we can't vote as panellists, but delegates can. So they're asking you just to see if you'd be interested in exploring SF a little bit more, and we've already had some in the chat box and comments and interest in that, so hopefully it won't be a resounding no from everyone.
Well, it's interesting. We had a couple of people drop off the webinar, but understandably because people have been busy, and
that's
I'd already received some apologies that they were double booked. But all of the responses so far, we've had 5 have all been yes. So
great.
They will be likely to explore SF in their service.
Brilliant. Thank you, Alan. That's great. My last question, I've got real chair's privilege here, which I'm abusing terribly, is thinking about JCP and the day in, day out nature of casework there, and quite high caseloads.
Yep.
Do you know, Emily, if they're looking at this or trying to use it, or is that an unrealistic goal, or
well, I left Job Centre Plus in 2011, but I'm still in contact with colleagues there, and they're definitely still using it. The work psychologists, which was the role that I had, they definitely still use it. and they are still tasked with training up advisors, particularly advisors who are supporting the more vulnerable staff.
Right, okay. So looking to the work and health programme that's coming now, starting to actually reach customers, I think this week or in the next couple of weeks, that might be touching that approach as well, do you think, working with those customers?
Yeah, and that would make sense, because then individuals are experiencing the same sort of flavour of interactions with people.
Yeah.
And so you may actually meet people who started that off, that sort of, sounds a bit tacky say journey, but you see what I mean, earlier on, before you come to work with them. It's just the whole flavour of the meetings are just much more positive.
Yeah, that comes across really clearly, actually, in all of the presentations, and how that approach makes a difference, which is great. So my last action, really, I think to take, which I think I've mentioned to Heidi before, is all of this approach resonates very much with what the Big Loss 3 are trying to do, the Big Loss 3 Fund, in terms of moving away from services or projects which feel like they are being done to communities, and rather generating projects and initiatives which come up from people's own desire and own interest. So I think for GUAC, for me, we've got various relationships with Big Loss 3. I think we need to take that conversation in and give some good examples of how our members are using that. We've obviously got Sovereign, looks like we've got Monmouthshire as well, and interest from Yarlington, Liverpool Mutual, etc. And I'm sure that once the recording is shared into our member area, more people will have a look at that, and we'll get those contact details shared so people can drop you a line. But that's an action I think I take away from today. So we've done our polls. Looking at the time, just final comments really for any of our speakers, or indeed final chat questions from delegates. Emily or Heidi or Jez?
No, for me, it would be a fantastic world if all of the organisations were using this approach. We've tried to do that internally where our other teams have gone on training, so income officers, housing officers, and externally when programmes like the Building Better Opportunities were still being shaped, we were talking to them about using solution focus and the difference we'd already made, but this was right at the early doors of us using it. So anything that we can do within the sector to encourage this, because it's clearly far more effective both for residents, teams and business, so it just makes total sense. And I think I saw some comments which would completely echo our own experience, where we're seeing more residents more vulnerable. And I think that is the nature of the welfare reforms, because previously those people have been assessed either as ESA claimants who were going to be permanently on ESA, or certainly for a longer time than they are now. And also even things like benefit cap with those coming off income support. That's a whole group of people that previously haven't been in a position where they were expected to work. And then just by our nature of being social housing, we will always continue to house those who have some vulnerabilities. So I think going for the future, it will help us to better serve those residents and communities.
Yeah. Well, I can't think of a better tone to finish on than that, really. Doing the best we can for our tenants and residents.